stars be with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Energetic Principles Podcast. My name is Melissa LaFara, and I'm an astrologer, tarot consultant, all-around creative from sunny San Diego, California. And today we're going to be looking at the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius cycle and the new moon in Sagittarius and the period that follows leading into the Gemini full moon that comes in mid-December. Now, just as a friendly reminder, this is a general reading, so take what resonates and leave the rest because only you know you best. And of course, if you'd like to go deeper with your astrology, consider signing up for a personal consultation, which you can do at energeticprinciples.com. All right, friends, well, we have a lot going on here at the end of November and through the middle of December. I mean, it's already holiday season, so we feel the hustle and bustle of the autumnal, changes and celebrations and all that we have to do to get ready for this cycle. So that's a lot as it is. But we're going to add a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius on top of it, and also a new moon cycle that is really steeped in a larger configuration that we've been feeling all year in 2024 and will carry on into 2025, which is the Jupiter-Saturn square. So with the Mercury retrograde period, Mercury went retrograde yesterday, depending on when you're watching this, Monday, November 25th. And Mercury in Sag is a lively sign for Mercury to be in, not to mention being retrograde, because Mercury in Sag is all about examining our beliefs, and maybe not even examining, displaying them, right? This is a fire sign, so fire is loud, it's outgoing, it speaks its truth, it speaks its mind, and it wants to understand, right? It's seeking to understand because that's the nature of Sagittarius. So it's a wonderful time when we're reviewing, right? We're talking about Mercury retrograde, so we're going to go back. We're looking at things. Mercury has been in Sag for a couple weeks now, right? So wherever Sagittarius energy is in your chart, first off, that's going to be lit up right now. So look in your personal astrology chart and see what house is indicated by Sagittarius. Because this is a good time to question what it is that we believe, what it is that we are thinking and taking in our overall vision in life and our philosophies, and how we are promoting those or how they might be shifting and changing in some way. Because that is the purpose of Mercury retrograde, is we get to go back and fine tune this. And we did have a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius last year too, so it's not our first rodeo in this area of the chart. But we want to explore what expanding our horizons look like from a mental position, and not just in our outer world, but in our inner world too. Because like I said, we want to come to that understanding, because if everything's changing and shifting, we want to be in a visionary headspace that really supports where we want to go in life. Now, the difficulty with Sag energy is it can be dogmatic sometimes, or I like to call it the great convincer, where it's like you can convince yourself or anybody of anything, right? The idea of you can sell, ice to a Eskimo. That is the thing with Sagittarius. And sometimes it can be associated with, same with Gemini, this idea of like lying. But is it lying if you believe it, right? That's the question. So we might want to look at where we're so certain of things, or we're just on that high horse, or we are communicating that to someone else. There's a lot of, because Mercury is retrograding in an opposition to Jupiter, there is a lot of high horse business and soapbox business going on that we can get into with other people, right? Because we're dealing with an opposition. So we don't want to be closed-minded. It's all about expanding our views and stretching our reach. And so we're going to bake this into the new moon cycle, because pretty much from the balsamic phase before we get to the new moon, up until the full moon in Gemini, where Mercury is going to station direct on the full moon that it rules, right? Cliffhanger on that. We're going to have a big Mercury moment. We are going to be navigating this retrograde. And it's not just Mercury, it's Mars too. So this is a highly reflective time, which is not necessarily easy to be reflective because there's a lot going on in fire, and fire just wants to do and be active and go and fast and inspired. But there's so much that we have to review in these areas of our chart. So let's go ahead and, speaking of charts, let's take a look at the transits here. And so you'll see on the screen, we actually have when Mercury went retrograde on November 25th. And you can see it over here at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. It's in that opposition to Jupiter, which we'll talk about. Mercury also makes a square to Saturn during its retrograde. And of course, the sun will meet Mercury at some point, which starts the new cycle with the inferior Cazimi. Now, one thing to sort of note with Mercury being in the opposition to Jupiter is that, first off, both of these planets are in the signs known as their detriment, and they're in mutual reception with one another. So this is what I like to call the ping pong effect, right? We have our thoughts and our perceptions and the information that's coming through in the conversations. And then we have Jupiter, which is our, expanded beliefs and our philosophies and our forward momentum in life and how we grow. And so we're sort of caught in this ping pong energy between these two planets right now, where we can go on these sort of tangents in our mind where we're just so focused on Jupiter issues, and we go back and forth, especially if we're, like I said before, in any type of argument or discourse or debate, whether it's with ourselves or with other people. It can kind of feel like it's just keeps going, the ball keeps going one way and then it comes back and then it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And then we have to learn how to adapt and shift, and how do we change this, right? That's the beauty of mutable signs. These are changing scenarios. So we're focused on our future and are expanding our options, but there's a lot of uncertainty involved right now and potential anxiety, especially since we're talking about mutable signs and we have this tension of the Jupiter-Saturn square that is building. Now, the one thing to remember with Mercury and Jupiter together, especially in oppositions, is that our options are limitless, right? To some extent, they're limitless. And so we could have some anxiety or around the decision-making process. We see all these options for our future, but nothing might have gelled completely. And so we're still working through them. Whereas Mercury, when it squares Saturn later on, so really December 4th through December 7th will be key Mercury retrograde moments because of the, basically it'll meet with the sun, it'll square Saturn, oppose Jupiter, and the sun will do the same at the same time. So there is this activation of what the Jupiter-Saturn story is, that pushing off and that growing and that foundation that we're building upon, and these big shifts we're making for our lives. We have sort of aha moments that come between December 4th and 7th. Right when Mars is stationing retrograde. So that is a hot spot, not only of December, but the entirety of 2024. Now, what's important to remember about Mercury squaring Saturn is that Saturn is all about limits, and it is the planetary force that will kill off options, right? Because it will put us in touch with reality and practicality, or maybe more of a spiritual impulse of well, yeah, I had all those options, but is that really in service to my soul and how I want to, the growth that I'm making? And so what's interesting about decision is the etymology behind it. Actually, if you think about scission, right, you think about incision, there's actually this connection with cutting. And so when we make a decision, we are stripping away options, right? Because we can't do it all. We can't have it all. So we want to hone in and fine tune. And I think that is a big part of this Mercury retrograde cycle as we look at Sagittarius' expansive horizons and everything that we could do with our life and the potentials and the enthusiasm. But how do we hone it in and streamline our energy, especially at the end of the year, so that as 2025 starts to get going, we are in a more solid space with what our vision is and how to pursue it. So let's go on. And of course, like I said, Mercury will station direct on the full moon on December 15th. So the entirety of the waxing stage of the new moon cycle is colored by Mercury retrograding in Sagittarius. Okay, so the new moon in Sag, here you see November 30th at 10:21 p.m. in San Diego time. We see this 9 degrees and 32 minutes of Sagittarius, a new moon. And what's important about this degree actually is that it's configured to a fixed star called Antares, which is the heart of the Scorpion. So it's, I know it's in Sagittarius and tropical, Western astrology, but as far as the constellation is concerned, it is the heart of the Scorpion. It's the center. It's bright. It's red. It's got a very intense magnitude, and it is known to be of the nature of Mars and Jupiter. So it's a very Martian star, which as we think about this new moon being in a trine to Mars, who's about to go retrograde in Leo here, there is this Martian impulse. And so some of the things Bernadette Brady brings up in her fixed star book is that she links Antares with obsession and an intensity and a probing like quality, if you think about Mars and its directness. And really, royal stars in general offer this connection with success and good fortune. But there can be danger and malevolence because if we get off track, there's always lessons that go with the fixed stars. And so even though it has that great potential to give power, it can be destructive. And Antares' particular destruction has to do from being rash and being headstrong. So we're talking about super Martian qualities here. And I think it's wise to remember this because especially as Mars slows down to station, making a trine in fire signs. Like I said before, fire is loud, it's outgoing, it's fast, it's quick. We have ego energy, especially with Mars in Leo. So one of the key pieces to this new moon is the fact that the moon is actually moving away and separating from this Mars energy. And it's moving towards a square with Saturn in Pisces. And then eventually that Jupiter opposition. So if we think about the separating Mars energy, especially as Mars is about to go retrograde and go on its own mission where it has to review its motivations and what it's doing and what the mission looks like. There can be a lot of enthusiasm and passion around what that mission could look like. But we also could be rash about it too. It's like how, especially if we want to just move on too fast, we might be in this place where we're like, oh, let's make moves, let's go. But there's this level of Saturn that we still have to deal with, right? And so that's that limitation if we do go a little bit overboard with the Mars or I like to think of it on the high side too, is it might be the motivation that we need to get through emotional and spiritual blockages, right? With the Saturn and Pisces energy. Especially since the sun is in an overcoming position to Saturn. So we're getting more of that solar quality that there are expansion options. There are options for awareness and general understanding and up-leveling our philosophy and our views on life. So another thing we have to take into account here is that we got this Mercury retrograde who is moving into combustion with the sun. It's under the beams right now, but it's very close to getting to the combustion phase. And it's in that opposition with Jupiter, who is ruling the lunation. And so, like I said before, there's sort of this ping pong effect going on. And so everything I was talking about earlier with that Mercury retrograde energy, that's going to be baked into this new moon where we are going back over our beliefs and why do we think this way? And are we on this high horse or are we convincing ourselves of something? But what is our long-term vision? What are the possibilities? There's so much to process. I think, during this new moon cycle, and especially the first couple weeks of it. And so let's see here. So what's interesting is when you think about Jupiter ruling this lunation in Gemini, Gemini is going to give us the facts. It's going to give us the, we're thinking things through. We're more leaning into our rational side, like from a logical position. This is the thing to do, right? We're reaching for objectivity, but we're doing so in the face of things that can be emotional hurdles or maybe tests of compassion in life. And sometimes we can't think our way through those. So our thinking response can only take us so far before it like distances us from maybe the real solution or what it is that we really have to address, because we have 2 planets in exile here, which do create a distancing effect. So that's important to remember during this cycle, and especially with Venus, who is trining Uranus too. And so there can be this leveling up of relationships, maybe in a practical way when you think about finances or resources. Let me take a little water here. But Uranus also has this quality of hot and cold and separation and moving at, from a distance from something or getting space. So there could be sort of this cooling off in relationships, but also this maybe through that distance or that way of, thinking outside the box of how we can actually connect. We can come back together in a more of a long-term committed fashion to see what that looks like. So I also think it could be really interesting with just how we purchase gifts, right? Let's get some practical gifts for people this year, think outside the box to get things for what people need that maybe are good for the planet. And, we're not just getting junk, we're getting quality things that can actually be used to better our lives. I'm just throwing that out there. It's better to buy less that is quality and useful than to buy more just to have more, right? It's very Mercury Jupiter opposition versus this Venus Uranus piece. So, so let us kind of move through some of the energies real quick of that is going to be happening during this new moon to full moon phase. So, of course, we have the entire Mercury retrograde cycle we're talking about. And we have the Mars stationing retrograde on December 6th. So let's move over to sort of this hotspot period. Here we see on December 4th, we see that Moon Pluto action. We're still getting situated in Pluto and Aquarius, so any moon conjunction is going to give us a lot of information. So definitely pay attention there. But really, it leads us into this period of around December 5th, well, really December 4th, through December 7th, give or take. So what we're seeing here, as you can see on the screen, is we're seeing the Mercury retrograde, inferior conjunction. We're seeing the Sun and Mercury both squaring Saturn. Mercury squares Saturn before the Sun does. And then goes on to it. Actually, no, sorry. Scratch that. Sun squares Saturn before Mercury does, because Mercury is still in configuration. It's like Mercury has Jupiter's message, the Sun has Saturn's message, and then they meet right in the middle during December 5th, December 6th, depending on where you are. And so it's almost like, I feel like there's going to be a light bulb moment here of what's changing, how to change. It's not going to change in that moment. We do have to have some adaptation going on with what it is that we're learning or communicating or the information that's coming in. But it does set the stage to how things can start to shift, especially when we get over to December 24th, when we have the Jupiter-Saturn square perfect. So yeah, keep in mind, there's a couple weeks before we sort of get the oomph of that put together, but at least we know, right? We understand. So this is a big time period right here, which then leads us to December 8th, which is our first quarter moon in Pisces. And it's going to go over Saturn and Neptune, which Saturn and Neptune, if you've tune into Gray Crawford and I's 2025 astrology forecast, Saturn Neptune is the big deal. So we're having a first quarter moon that is aligned with this energy. And so we're activating from this imaginal place, from this spiritual place, but also addressing where we might have, some issues around Pisces themes, like escaping from something or, being in a delusional space or, just being in a space of uncertainty or doubt and not seeing things clearly. And how do we work through that? Because whatever we kind of get lit up with around December 8th can really take us into April 2025. There's a lot of foreshadowing that happens in this first week or so of December. Now, another hotspot moment of this period is Venus opposing Mars on December 12th. And Mars is retrograde, right? So Mars is in its process, and I'll be recording a video here with Yolanda Bella that will come out, I believe, next week on the Mars retrograde cycle. So stay tuned for that. But Mars and Venus in an opposition is always sort of some sort of relational tension or that opposing effect of like, what are my desires? What do I want? What am I passionate about? How is my journey reconfiguring? And then where does it leave relationships? Or what am I open to? What am I attracted to? How do I come together and unite? And oppositions are, they're sort of that tug of war force. And so there's just prepare for, going back and forth here. Now, the beauty of this is that Mercury retrograde, who's getting close to stationing, is sextiling Venus and trining Mars. So at least there's this communication component. If we don't get like rash and headstrong, hopefully we've had time with our Mercury retrograde moment to like get in a good headspace. So I think there's this, the benefit of being able to see the bigger picture and to be able to talk things through and to do so in a somewhat fast manner as far as when it comes to retrogrades, right? Because these are all outgoing signs. So it's not like people will keep things to themselves. You want to have this dealt with just because outgoing signs move fast. And so really this brings us to the point of our full moon, which will be December 15th. Mercury will be stationing, and then we have this full moon in Sag energy. Full moon in Gemini energy, but really Gemini and Sag, full moons are polarities. So more on that later. But let us go back and now do a little tarot pulls before we leave, some cards, just to get a kind of a different insight as to what is going on with this energy. Because they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So this overarching view of this time is actually this warrior of Bloom's energy in this balsamic phase. So we might be reflecting on the ego's motivations and our personal goals in life. This is a closing down cycle, right? She's essentially, look at her, she's just blazing off on her horse, very Sag. But she is in that closing cycle. So we are more in this introspective space of what we're racing towards, right? Because the new moon brings in this theme of the warrior of stems in this waxing gibbous phase. And so this is a growing imaginal space. But we are, also learning about where we or maybe other people are living in an idealistic world, perhaps only a delusional realm, right? Like she's kind of see-through there and she's just, my rainbow rose colored, and we kind of have to look at that. So there is this idea of going with the flow and this waxing creativity, but we may also just want to escape from things in our lives or not deal with particular things. And so it's a little bit of both. So that's a theme that comes up. And so what to move away from during this cycle is actually the 6 of Leaves in this waxing gibbous phase, which might be this idea just like to make up your mind, move on, distance yourself. Your rational perspective says, just go, just move through this. Like, I'm over this. Let's go. What are you waiting for? But the issue is is that what we're here to embrace in this time period is actually the devil in the first quarter phase. And so this is about dealing with our shadows in life. This is about dealing with our fears, our obsessions, what holds us back, what controls us. And also what we might be trying to control, right? And so I always like to think about the devil card as being unrealized potential. And so we have to move through this, whatever it is that's kind of chaining our reality or that we're like controlled by, and more of the difficult things when we talk about shadow integration. And so first quarter means we have to activate this. We have to get in on it. There's no moving around it. Like, it's going to require participation, and there will be tension around it. And so it brings us to the full moon culmination around the time when Mercury goes direct, with the 9 of blooms in the last quarter phase. And really, this makes a lot of sense to me because the moon will be waxing through this decan, and this card's decan actually right before the full moon. And this is about emotional endurance. Look at this kitty cat just holding on for dear life. And so I like to think about it as the hang in there baby card, like hang in there, you got this, right? And so there might be this activation to hang in there and do one final push around something that you need to do in order to close down a cycle, fully letting go. Especially of things like defensive energy. Because it would always be like, oh, when's the next thing going to happen? And that might be what we're afraid of or what holds us back. And so how do we muster up the courage to move through that? And also delegating. It's a wonderful card to be like, oh, you know what? I can't do this all on my own. I kind of overstretched my reach there. I'm overextended. That's too big of an idea for me to do by myself. I'm kind of, I'm a little delusional about that, or what the kids call these days, delulu. So delegating, bringing other people in, Sag, Gemini, mutual reception, right? Get help. So lastly, some oracle polls, or just one actually, in relation to this cycle. And I got listen with our shell here, and escape. Escape has been a theme, not only for this broadcast, but the last one I think I did with the Taurus full moon. I don't know, I've seen escape a few times. And so what comes up for me is whenever I get this card, this is all about stop talking. Listen. Whether it's listening to your intuition, listening to, silence to let things come in, listening to other people. A lot of people feel like, they don't listen to me, but are you listening to them? So listen, put your ear up to the shell, see what comes through. And with the escape, it's almost like sometimes we need to get away from all the noise to listen. So if that's applicable for you, distance yourself, get the quiet so that you can hear your inner voice. But also take in and listen to where you might be trying to get away from something and just escape something rather than address it. And you're not really fully taking in and listening to the issue or the other person. Because how many times people come at you and they're like, I want to talk about this again, or we haven't resolved this. And you're like, no, talking about the cold shoulder or the silent treatment or the, I don't have time for you, we can't truly listen and move on if we're just trying to escape the situation all the time. So that's kind of what's coming up for me with these cards. So I hope that sits well with you, gives you some food for thought, all of this here. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you would like to do more personal work, come on over to energeticprinciples.com to book a consultation, or feel free to reach out to me. Visit me on Instagram at Energetic Principles, where I do weekly little updates of what's going on in the sky. And of course, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Heavenly Wind. That gives you a little detailed information as well. And I'm cooking up things behind the scenes. I'm really got that Sagittarius inspiration going on. So stay tuned there. But in the meantime, Subscribe wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on YouTube or podcast style. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment below. Let me know what's going on in your life, what you're feeling. If you resonate with any of the things that I talked about here today, I would love to hear more. Use that Mercury Jupiter action. And I'll listen. I promise I'll listen. And share this with a friend, leave a review wherever you listen. All those things really help my pursuits to expand Sagittarius style. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for tuning in. I wish you the best as you move in this changeable time, right? There's so much going on. I wish you a wonderful holiday, and I'll see you before the full moon. And as always, may the stars be with you.